What is up, everyone? It's Quinn here, and in today's video, I'm going to be going through my top 30 running back rankings for week 7 of the NFL season. If you guys enjoyed the video, you find it helpful, do me a huge favor, hit that like button, subscribe. If you have any fantasy questions, you can drop them down below. But let's just dive right into the rankings here. And I do want to start off by just noting that there are a lot of running backs that are heading into week 7 banged up. Not a ton of guys that I'm like super confident are going to miss. I'm also not overly confident these guys are going to play. The only running back that I think is pretty likely not going to suit up this week is Travis Etienne with his shoulder. But you have guys, like a Brian Robinson, a Jonathan Taylor, James Cook, James Conner, Aaron Jones, a lot of these players that are going to be questionable heading into this week. So I'm ranking them, but I will mention the injury, as I talk about them. But starting off here in tier 1, I have Derrick Henry, Saquon Barkley, Kyren Williams, and Kenneth Walker. For Derrick Henry here, he is the current running back 2 in points per game. He is leading all running backs in rush attempts, rushing yards, and touchdowns. The dude has been a monster. As long as they're not getting blown out, if they're leading or in a competitive game script, he's going to rack up a monster workload, and he is going to be super efficient with a ton of touchdown upside. Then I have Saquon Barkley as my RB2. I guess he has like his revenge game this week going up against the Giants. Week 6 was pretty much like his first dud game of the season. Still a high-end RB1. I do think he's going to have a big game here against his former team. Then with Kyren Williams, he's coming off the bye week. He's averaging 22 opportunities per game. He's leading all running backs in red zone touches. And I do think this is a pretty decent matchup here against the Raiders. So I like Kyren as a high-end RB1. And then the final guy in this tier, Kenneth Walker, going up against the Falcons. Kenneth Walker is the RB3 in points per game. We know he's a very good runner on the ground, but what's impressed me the most about Walker's usage this year has been his receiving workload. He did not catch passes in college. He really didn't catch passes early on in his NFL career. He has been targeted 16 total times in the last 2 games. So really, regardless of game script, Kenneth Walker is going to be totally fine. Now, shifting into tier 2, I'm going to start off this tier with one of those injured players. It's going to be Jonathan Taylor. He's missed the last 2 games with a high ankle sprain. Going up against the Dolphins here. If Jonathan Taylor's active, you're obviously playing him. This is a great matchup here against the Dolphins. They've allowed the 3rd most points per game to the running back position. But like I said, we don't really know if he's going to play. But if he does play, fire him up as an RB1. I have Alvin Kamara going up against the Broncos as my RB6. He is the current running back 1 in points per game. He's just kind of in a tough spot here with the Saints offense. They were just booming through 2 weeks. Really kind of fallen off since then. You have Spencer Rattler at quarterback. Derek Carr's out. The wide receivers are super banged up. The Saints are tied for the lowest implied points this week. So I don't think they're going to score a ton, but I do think we're looking at a spot here where Kamara is just going to be force-fed, whether it's on the ground or through the air. I still think he'll be a nice option, but I do think the offense is lacking, that ceiling of some of these other running backs. After Kamara, going with Tony Pollard here, with Tajay Spears banged up, I think it really just unlocks Tony Pollard's workload. And then you pair that with the fact that this is just a great matchup here. The Bills have allowed the 2nd most points per game to the running back position. Pollard's been impressive. The usage has been there. He's catching passes. He's getting nice usage on the ground. I think Pollard is a really nice running back 1 play when you do factor in the matchup. Then I have Joe Mixon going up against the Packers. He has had 2 healthy games this season. In those 2 games, he has put up 26.8 and 27.2 PPR points. If you have Joe Mixon, he's obviously locked into your lineup. Then I have Breece Hall going up against the Steelers. And we had a pretty big fantasy day out of Breece, even though he didn't get into the end zone. And I think his usage was very, very encouraging. This was kind of a backfield where his usage had been fine, but you had, Braylon Allen kind of working in, getting like double-digit opportunities per game over the last 4. Breece Hall went out week 6, took 23 of 28 running back opportunities. I do think it's not the best matchup here against the Steelers. The Jets are tied for the lowest implied points, but I still think Breece Hall is a nice RB1 play. And if you have him, I do think, week 6 should be pretty encouraging. Then I have Chuba Hubbard going up against the Commanders. It still remains to be seen whether or not Jonathan Brooks is going to make his debut. It seems like they're going to open up his practice window this week, but that doesn't necessarily mean he's going to be good to go, playing here in week 7. And it also doesn't mean that he's going to have really like any significant usage. They could just be kind of slowly easing his way into the offense for the first time. So I still really like Chuba here. He's averaging 20.7 PPR points per game in his 4 games with Dalton. So these weapons for the Panthers, specifically Chuba and Deontay, with Dalton at quarterback, they've been studs. I think you just keep going back to the well with those guys. And then to wrap up tier 2, it's going to be Bijan Robinson. Definitely had kind of like a big breakout week 6, 25 and a half PPR points. The problem here with Bijan Robinson is that he was out carried by Tyler Algier in this matchup. And I know some people, I talked about him as a sell high. They were saying that a lot of Algier's touches came in garbage time. And some of that is true, right? Like heading into the fourth quarter, I think it was Bijan Robinson 13 carries, Tyler Algier 9. But that is still a very competitive split. Tyler Algier took 6 of the 8 goal line carries. And if I want somebody to be a workhorse running back, I want them to be the guy getting the work towards the end of the game to seal it. Like this idea that, oh, it's just garbage time. Like Tyler Algier stepped in, he took those carries. I want those carries for a guy like Bijan Robinson. So it's still somewhat concerning. I still think he's an RB1. Not a great or terrible matchup this week, but I do still like him as a sell high if someone's going to be completely back in on him after a big week 6. Now shifting into tier 3, I'm going to start off this tier with Jahmyr Gibbs, and I'm definitely going to be a little bit lower on these Lions running backs than normal. It's just a tough matchup here against the Vikings. They have allowed the second fewest points per game to the running back position, and I know both Gibbs and Montgomery have kind of been neck and neck in terms of their production. I do slightly prefer Jahmyr Gibbs this week, just because I think this could be a favorable game script for him. In a lot of the Lions matchups, they're getting an early lead. It's a favorable game script for Dave Montgomery to just pound the rock. They're not going to need to throw it a ton, so that receiving volume isn't going to be there for Jahmyr Gibbs. The Lions are actually 2.5-point dogs in this game against the Vikings, so I do think this could be a game. Maybe they're trailing. Jahmyr Gibbs really getting unlocked as a pass catcher. So I do slightly prefer Gibbs, but as you can see, they're very close together here within this tier. Then I have Jordan Mason going up against the Chiefs. Not a great spot here for Mason. He left the Thursday night game with a shoulder injury. He's day-to-day with that. So if he does play, this is where he would slot in. But he's kind of returning to a really tough matchup here. The Chiefs have allowed the fewest points per game to the running back position. So not an ideal spot here for Mason. Then I have Brian Robinson, another one of these players who's banged up. We don't know if he's going to be good to go. Obviously missed week 6. I think he left at halftime of week 5. Hopefully he is able to return because this is like a smash spot for him. The Panthers have allowed the most points per game to the running back position. This was the matchup where Bijan was kind of able to get right. Didn't have a high ceiling game before that. The Falcons play the Panthers. Bijan Robinson goes off. So if Brian Robinson can suit up, I think he is a must start as long as we're not hearing like he's super limited or anything. But if he's not able to go, Austin Eckler obviously gets a massive bump, and we'll talk about him later. Then I have David Montgomery. He is the running back 8 in points per game. He has had a great start to the season. I am just slightly lower on him this week due to the matchup, like I talked about with Gibbs. Then I have J.K. Dobbins here going up against the Cardinals. He is coming off a season-high 27 opportunities. They are force-feeding J.K. Dobbins. This Chargers offense clearly wants to run the ball. The receiving usage, not quite there, which is somewhat concerning just in terms of like his weekly floor, but still a very solid high-end RB2 play. Then I have James Cook going up against the Titans, another one of these dudes who's, just injuries kind of up in the air. It seemed like he was trending towards playing Monday earlier on in the week, getting into the weekend. He ends up not being able to play on Monday Night Football if you had him in your lineup. I guess hopefully you had, a Ray Davis or a Ty Johnson kind of fill in there, but he doesn't play Monday. It's like a toe/foot injury. So we'll see if he's able to go. I will say though, this is a team that has been fine kind of running a little bit of a committee, especially last year. They didn't want to give James Cook like this huge workload. And then you see Ray Davis go out and look really, really impressive, taking the bulk of the opportunities. So I wouldn't be shocked that when James Cook comes back, this is a little bit more of a split than what we saw earlier on, where Ray Davis is involved. He looks like a very good running back, and if you can mix up, the opportunities between two solid guys, I don't really know why you wouldn't. So James Cook, mid-tier RB2, if he is good to go. Then I have James Conner, who's kind of in and out of the Week 6 game with an ankle injury. We'll see if he's good to go. Going to have, strong usage in this backfield. This Cardinals offense, honestly, is just kind of struggling at this point. Now let's pivot into tier 4, where I'm going to start off with Josh Jacobs. And he's just been really underwhelming to start off this 2024 season. He is maxed out at 16.4 PPR points. I feel like with where he was drafted, like 2-3 turn, probably at latest like mid-round 3 to late round 3, you were kind of hoping he would be averaging in that 16.4 PPR point per game area. That has not happened. He is maxing out at 16.4 PPR points. It's also just a tough matchup here against the Texans. They've allowed the 5th fewest points per game to the running back position. So like at some point, I know he's not getting into the end zone. He is kind of due for some touchdowns, but we have to react at some point in a not great matchup. This is where I have him here as like a mid-tier RB2 play. Then I have Chase Brown going up against the Browns. Definitely a riser based on the split between him and Zach Moss. He saw 13 opportunities compared to Zach Moss's 7. Chase Brown has put up 14 plus PPR points in his last 3 games. If he can continue to pull away as the running back 1 here for the Bengals, he is going to be a great option rest of season. I'm still not convinced he's going to dominate the opportunities the way he did last week, but I definitely think he has the edge in the backfield at this point. No, Zach Moss kind of had a costly fumble. Chase Brown almost did also, but he also ripped off the long touchdown run. So I think at this point, definitely have to favor Chase Brown there. Then I have Aaron Jones dealing with a hip injury going up against the Lions. He left the week 5 game with that hip injury, had the week 6 bye. I believe he's back at practice, but I don't think he's like a full participant or anything. It is just a tough matchup here if he does make the return going up against the Lions. They have allowed the 3rd fewest points per game to the running back position. I will say, though, if Aaron Jones does not play, I think Ty Chandler pretty much like fills this spot as like a solid mid to back end RB2 option if Aaron Jones cannot go. And then the final guy in this tier who might actually be underranked, it is Kareem Hunt going up against the Niners. In week 4 before the bye, 2 weeks before the bye, he had 17 opportunities once he kind of took over as a starter. Then week 5, the week before the bye, he had 28 opportunities. So he has been dominating the usage. I don't think that usage is like set in stone. Like, would I be shocked if we saw Carson Steele, Samaje Perine like slightly more involved? No. Like, I don't think he's completely locked in, but I would lead towards him being the clear, leader of this backfield. Should be their running back 1. Not the best matchup here against the Niners, but it definitely hasn't been a death sentence for opposing running backs. Chiefs offense been a little bit underwhelming, but I think Kareem Hunt is still a very strong running back to play. Now, pivoting into tier 5, pretty depressing to have my guy Devon Achane here in tier 5, but we are at least 1 week away still from getting Tua back. He's coming off of a concussion, but he had the week 6 bye. Seems like he's progressing well, so hopefully he's good to go here for week 7. It's just in the games without Tua, he hasn't put up 10 PPR points, below 10 in his last 3 games. The first 2 weeks, it was looking great. Tua was healthy week 1, played, at least a decent amount in week 2. Achane was rolling. That has not been the case with Tua out of the lineup, so we have to adjust at this point. Then I have Ramondre Stevenson going up against the Jaguars. He did not play in week 6, dealing with a foot injury. Hopefully he's back this week because it's a strong matchup. The Jaguars have allowed the 5th most points per game to the running back position. We just saw DeAndre Swift have a nice fantasy day also. Then the last guy in this tier, going to be Najee Harris going up against the Jets. He is coming off a season-high 20.2 PPR points. Jets had been pretty decent against the run, but we just saw the Bills go out there. Ray Davis had a lot of success on the ground. Don't think it's the worst matchup in the world. I think Najee settles in as like a fringe RB2 play. And then the final tier here, tier 6, starting to get a little sketchy at the running back position, but I think some of these guys are definitely still playable. I'm going to start off this tier with Bucky Irving going up against the Ravens. I'll start off by saying it's definitely not a good matchup here against the Ravens. And then there's definitely just some uncertainty within this backfield, right? Early on, it was Rachaad White running back 1, Bucky Irving RB2. Then Bucky Irving kind of, earned his way into a 50-50 split with Rachaad White. Rachaad White misses week 6. We're thinking, all right, this is Bucky Irving's opportunity. Then you see Sean Tucker step up and just have an amazing game, both on the ground and through the air. We're hearing Todd Bowles talk about how, Sean Tucker's earned opportunities. This could be a 3-headed dragon here with those 3. Now, to be honest, I don't think Todd Bowles has a ton of influence on the offense. He's obviously a defensive guy. You have Liam Cohen in there, who I think is doing a great job. So I'm not taking what Todd Bowles says and saying all right, this is exactly what's going to happen. I know he's the head coach, but more of a defensive-minded guy. So this could be a 3-headed committee if Rachaad White's back. I'm not saying it's impossible. I think it could be a situation where maybe Sean Tucker fades back into that RB3 role. You go back to the 50-50 split with Rachaad White, Bucky Irving. I also think there's a chance here where they look at Rachaad White, the game he's out, both running backs have big games. Rachaad White's really struggled as a runner throughout his career. Maybe it turns into a close split between Bucky Irving and Sean Tucker, who's now stepping up, earning more opportunities. I just think there's a lot up in the air at this point. I would say out of all 3, Bucky Irving would be my favorite play just because he's been the common denominator in both of the splits. But like I said, we could have touches going three different ways. I could be higher on both Bucky Irving and Sean Tucker if Rashad White misses another week. Definitely something I'll probably update in my updated rankings later on in the week. After Bucky Irving, I have Tank Bigsby, and this is a weird spot for Bigsby because you would think that Travis Etienne going down, being out would be, a massive plus here for Tank. He could step in, potentially be the workhorse of this Jaguars offense. Unfortunately, if you do have Tank Bigsby, that is not what we saw in the Week 6 game against the Bears. Travis Etienne goes down early. Dearness Johnson ends up playing more snaps, running more routes, and taking more opportunities than Tank Bigsby, which, it seems crazy because Tank has been really good in his opportunities, super efficient on the ground. Seems like they don't really trust him on third downs. They don't like him as the pass catching back. They kind of just want him to be like this early down grinder, which was not great in a trailing game script. I do think, though, this week, assuming Etienne does not play, this is a pretty solid matchup for him. They're 5.5-point favorites, which I think, leads to him kind of being like that hammer, the guy who could be closing out the game. The Patriots have also allowed the sixth most points per game to the running back position. So I think Tank is interesting. Definitely being a little cautious here because the usage last week was pretty awful given the injury, but I do think this could be a decent spot for him. Then I have Austin Eckler going up against the Panthers. This has been a Commanders backfield that has supported multiple running backs. We saw with Brian Thomas Jr. out, Austin Eckler dominated the opportunities, took 14 of the 16. Now, I do think some of that was due to the game script. They were trailing for most of it. Jeremy McNichols was pretty much a non-factor. So I think if Brian Thomas is out, Austin Eckler is pretty much a must-start at that point, especially in this matchup with the Panthers, who have allowed the most points per game. If Brian Robinson does play, I think he kind of falls into like this mid-tier RB3 area. Then I have Tyrone Tracy going up against the Eagles. This is definitely like a placeholder ranking until we figure out the Devin Singletary injury. He's missed the last two games with a groin injury. In those two games, Tyrone Tracy has been crazy impressive, 14 and 22.7 PPR points. He looks good on the ground. He can catch passes. I would not be shocked that when Singletary comes back, if Tracy was the running back one. I also would not be surprised if this just turns into a very, very gross split between these two. So if Singletary misses another game, you probably throw Tyrone Tracy into tier 3. Like, that's probably how high I'd be on him. Maybe tier 4, but in like that mid-tier RB2 area is where I'd have Tracy. If Singletary's back, then we're just going to have to monitor the reports. Is he going to be limited? Who are they leaning towards as a starter? So something that we'll have to wait and see. And then the final guy to wrap up the top 30, it's Zach Moss. Had his worst usage of the season in week 6, but I don't think it's like a lost cause. I would not be shocked if this was still close to 50-50 moving forward. They still trust him on third downs. I think he'll filter in near the goal line. I don't think he's completely cooked at this point. Definitely a few other names that could have kind of, slid on here. You have Tyler Algier, who, out-carried Bijan Robinson. A few other dudes, Javonte Williams, could have found his way on here. But that's going to wrap it up for my top 30. If you guys enjoyed, hit that like button, subscribe. Any questions, drop them down below. But thank you for stopping by, and I will see you in the next one.